What's up, YouTube? So I've wanted to do this for quite a long time. I've managed to accumulate the parts rather easily, actually. I want to relocate the battery in my Impreza to the rear and keep it inside the vehicle in the hatch. I've got the idea of removing the methanol tank that's in there right now. So getting this guy out of here, because I'm probably not going to use it in this car again. It may make its way into the 240, you never know. And then probably shift this sub box over here and probably put the battery over on that side. So I've got basically everything I need to do this. Battery box, which is actually larger than the one I needed, but I got two different sizes at the time, and the other one's quite a bit smaller. I'll end up using it in the 240 to relocate the battery in that. Got some used cable that I'm going to reuse for this job. Obviously the battery terminals and a breaker. So where I'm going to begin is actually pull the battery out and sit it in the box, and then kind of see how I'm going to route the cabling, where I'm going to put the breaker, because I'll probably put it on the inside of the box. So I got the battery out of the car, I got it sitting in the box. You can see there's quite a bit of extra space in here. I've got to make it so the battery isn't rocking around and going all over the place. The weight of the battery is going to kind of hold it down, and it will have the cover strapped onto it, so it'll be safe. And the box will be put down to the car, so everything should stay fairly stationary. But I don't want the battery sliding around in here and messing up with some of the connections. So I'm going to use a block of wood. Yes, a block of wood. And I'm going to trim it to size. I'm going to drop it down in there, and that's probably where I'm going to attach the breaker, and have it sitting at the bottom. The positive lead will go down into the bottom, connect to the one side of the breaker, and then the cable coming from the rear of the car will come onto that terminal, come out of the box, and go all the way to the front to attach to the original wiring. The ground side will be a lot easier, just a terminal with a looped piece of wire going right over to the body of the car. So I'm going to make a very rough guesstimate on where I need to cut this block of wood. It's going to be right about there, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a block of wood. Okay, so I got the block all cut, and it should fit in here pretty snug. It's got a little gap, but it's not a big deal. I'll probably actually sit it to one side and then put some screws in through the side here to kind of hold it in place. And then the breaker should be able to go something like that. And then I'll fasten the breaker to the block. The battery won't shift around. I can actually put another shim down on this side of it if I have to, and then we can start on the wiring. Got the block installed. It's actually screwed in the side here, so I've put two screws in to kind of hold the block into place, and I've screwed the breaker directly to the block. I've also painted the block black. You can paint yours if you'd like. You don't have to. So that's going to be basically it, and I'm ready to move on to the wiring. So I've got one terminal here. I think the ground is going to be very simple to put on. I basically have this one made up ground cable already, so I can just come off of here and kind of loop it around and come out the backside over here somewhere. Something like this, and then it should give me enough length to put the cable wherever I want to. I just gotta find a really good spot to put it that's not going to corrode, and that would be the ground side. So I'll get that fastened up, and then we can start on the positive terminal. If you've got a terminal that's actually too tight and it won't go down over a post, this one will. But if you grab some needle nose and just kind of put them in there and then just pry it apart a little bit, it'll open right up. Allows you to get it on all the way. you want to try and get this terminal as far down as possible so that you're ensured that you're clamped around the whole post. You don't want it so tight that you can't get it back apart, but it needs to be tight enough that you cannot move it on the post. It's clamped completely on there. When I already have a crimped eyelet like that, I like to put it right underneath the bracket for the terminal. So I'll put it in between the bracket and the terminal and tighten the bracket right down onto it. That gives you a lot of contact surface. And then tightening this one, you want to make sure that that terminal doesn't move at all and everything's completely solid. That gives you the ultimate connection. So the ground side's done. Okay, I'm ready to put on this positive terminal. It needs to be opened up a little bit. A lot of people don't know or don't realize, but the two posts on a top posts on a battery are different sizes. The ground side's always a little bit smaller than the positive. And because this one positive red cable that I have is complete end to end, to use it I'm going to actually have to make a cut. So the idea here is to kind of come down to the breaker, something like that, and I'll have to get another terminal, two more terminals actually, one to put this piece of cable and then one to put on the other end of the cable to come off of there to go to the front of the car. So I'm just going to try and kind of, I'll put this into place and then kind of figure out how long it needs to be and make the cut. So I'm going to make the cut right here. That should give me lots of length to drop this cable down to the breaker. Something like that. And the other wire will have to get looped and probably fastened to the box to keep it from moving, and it'll come out on this side. And now that I have a terminal I can actually bolt to, I can just cut the amplifier 12 volt source really short and basically bring it right over from the amplifier right directly to the battery, and same with the negative side. I'll probably just put it right to the negative post. So I thought I had a couple of these eyelets lying around, but I don't. So I'm going to have to go out and get a couple, and I'll come back and I'll show you how you prep this wire and get one of these guys installed. I've been down to the local parts store and I've got some new electrical fittings for either crimping or soldering onto new cable. These are for 4 gauge. I'm pretty sure this is 4 gauge cable. And it's got a 3/8 hole, which is a little bit large to go over my breaker, so I'm going to have to use a little washer to go over top to clamp them down good. But I'm going to show you about how I go about getting one of these to stay on the end of this. So the first thing you want to do is obviously take some of the wire insulation off so you can have contact from copper to copper, and I think it's going to be right about there. It's okay if it's a little sticks out, not too big of a deal. So now get that bare copper. You'll see that slips in there pretty good, pretty tight all the way up to the insulation. So the next step, I'll put this in the vise with the open end out, something like that, so I can get ready to put this into the fitting. You might be wondering what we're up to. So get yourself a little propane torch. It can even be one of those little mini torches, those work pretty good. Some thick solder. And you kind of got to get everything in your hand. So you see I got the wire between these two fingers, the solder up here, the torch in the other hand. The vise is holding the fitting for me. And you start getting the fitting hot enough, you'll dip the solder into the side of the fitting, and eventually it'll just start to liquefy and fill that fitting with solder. The vise will take a lot of the temperature from the torch, so it might take a little while for me. There it goes. So you want to keep it nice and hot while you're filling it. And don't fill it all the way to the end, just get it nice and probably 3/4 full. And while it's still nice and hot, I'm just going to dip the wire right in there, and if it stops, just start heating the fitting. You'll see the solder actually come out of the fitting quite a bit. You just hold it there until it starts to cool. The temperature will drop pretty quick because it is still clamped up in the vise. And you don't want to touch it yet, but that's completely soldered on there. And then after it cools a little bit, I can't really tell how hot or cold it is. Let's take the electrical tape. Just get some nice tight wraps around the end of the terminal all the way to the flat end, and then back up over the wire. And that's how I do that. So another way to do this is like with a crimping block. So you just sit this down into a little block, half a block. You sit the other block on top, and it's got a crimping tooth inside of it. And as you whack it with a hammer, it'll pinch that and crimp it all together. Not as good in my opinion. Crimping all together is not as good as soldering in my opinion. But I've learned throughout the world a lot of people go with crimping over solder, so if you can do both, then you're made. Now that this cable's completely finished, I'm going to go put it down on this side of the breaker, put that little washer that I have, and then thread down the nut and tighten it up. You don't want to over tighten those, it's easy to break the whole post right out of the base of the thing. Okay, so that side of it is done, sitting like that. So now I got one more cable to make up, and then pretty much ready to get this going into the car. I figured, you know what, it's going to be a lot faster for me just to be able to show you what I did instead of taking you step by step through the car. I think showing you setting up the battery box and the way I did that was important, so that's why I did that. But I've got pretty much everything routed through the car and in. So I'll just give you a quick overlook of what's back here. So here's the actual battery. This is probably where it's going to sit for now. So my sub box usually sits here, and I use a ratchet strap coming across the top to bind it down to the child safety latches. So that's probably where it's going to sit for now. But down in there you can see I came through the side here, starting to run low on wire for another reason why it's sitting here. But I drilled a hole coming through the side of the battery box and got that cable on there, and the block's in there. Everything's kind of heavy and fastened. The ground actually comes up onto a long stud coming from the strut, and that's a nut locked down on the strut, and the second nut locking the ground to the body. So then our cable, positive cable, goes down along the left side of the car up to the driver's footwell area, and it goes basically up underneath the dash and poked through the firewall where most of my other wiring comes through. And then as you can see, I've actually looped that wire right down to the starter, and I'm using the starter as my my junction, you could say. So the original battery cable that came up to the battery from the starter, I basically had a 5/16 nut and bolt holding that together with a couple washers, just to feed power up to the fuse box. So this could be rewired a different way later on, but I've left it that way for now. And the ground basically got pulled right out of here. I've lopped this front body ground off for now. It's just basically for the front radiator support, and I'll end up I'll redo this ground at some point, and I'd like to give a ground up actually and put it on the block as opposed to having it on the transmission here, just to feed a little bit better ground. And then over here are ECU grounds, and I'm definitely going to run a new wire coming all the way, probably up right up to this cable or this post. At this point, I'm pretty sure I can just go to the breaker, switch it on, and I should be able to crank the starter. Oh, that's a good sign. So here we go. That's a good sign. Now I will probably want to check to see what system voltage is after I get things like finalized and buttoned up, just to make sure I am getting enough ignition voltage. Yes, my car will run NA, no problem. And that's going to finish it up for this video. I've got to do more exhaust work, so that's going to be probably what's next. And I'm going to have to at least start soaking those bolts down now with some penetrating fluid to get them apart. I think I have all new hardware for the exhaust, so I probably won't have to use the rusty stuff that's there. But make sure to check back for that video, because it should be pretty good. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.